This is the Universal Wrestling Podcast. Inside the ring, outside the ring, it's all here.
We're talking about the greatest sport of all, professional wrestling.
Now here's your host,
the cream of the crop,
Nick Dieterling.
Come on! Welcome back to the Universal Wrestling Podcast. His name is Chris Dunn. My name is Nick Dieterling. We have a very special guest on the program, Scott Garland, FKA Scotty to Hotty. Scott, thank you for coming on. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Doing great, Chris. We've discussed this off air. We're trying to push this awareness for this for the LLS, and it's really important for us. And it's really nice to talk to, guys like you, Scott, guys like Adam Cole, guys like Jeff Jarrett. But it's more important to make awareness for this amazing cause. Let's get to it. Chris, you want to say anything before we start?
Yeah, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks. We're in the home stretch of this donation drive. So, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, they've done, I talked about the impact that, cancer had on my family and like my experience at WWE, being on the Raw Warrior team when Roman announced when it came back, and we had Adam Cole kind of talk about how it hit his family in a recent episode too. So, this organization, they do such great work where, it's not just leukemia, lymphoma is the name. They have helped so many different kind of blood cancers and made lives better for patients, their families, and wherever you can donate, whether it's, $10, $5, $1, every little bit helps, and it goes to an amazing cause. So please click on the link. Even if you can't donate, read about the organization. They do amazing work.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. You guys worked with each other for a little, right?
Yeah,
we did. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hear about that.
So here's the embarrassing part, Chris, is I didn't even know you weren't there anymore. So when the whole COVID thing happened, things got really crazy, and there were a lot of cuts, and a lot of people started working from home, and you didn't know who was still with the company, who wasn't. And, time just went by, and I just realized recently that you must not be there anymore. Like, I thought you were still there.
Yeah, it was, the COVID thing played a big role. Like right before the pandemic happened, I got approval to move to LA. So I was, living out here, and then that happened. And, to your point with the COVID stuff, like we started going to skeleton crews. Like the list was like so small. It happened. I don't think this was Mania. I think so. I think it was Austin 316 Day was like the first Raw pandemic. And like, I wasn't even scheduled to go to it because like we were going like that few people.
No, this was at the PC at this time.
Yeah, first PC Raw. They had done a SmackDown before it. And yeah, it was like wild. Like it was like a handful of people, and like we were like sometimes doing double tapings. Like I was also doing all the offsites, which at the time include like the Viking Raiders and the Street Profit offsites. And I was flying cross country during COVID like every week, and like I really started getting worn down. And even when things came back, it kind of like it was such a big thing where, I moved to LA to kind of try to get into other parts of entertainment. And I was like, I have to kind of go all in on this if it's going to happen.
Right.
And it was very tough to leave. Like I grew up loving wrestling, and like I also had like talked to Dave about potentially, instead of doing Raw or SmackDown, just flying to Orlando every week for NXT, because like NXT was always, you were there, like you obviously know better than most, like what a special time that was working at NXT.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I keep saying. It was such a special time. It was such a special place and such a special atmosphere. And I keep saying, I've said it a million times, the whole "We Are NXT," the hashtag "We Are NXT" thing wasn't just some marketing thing that somebody made up and it fit. It was a real thing. I think anybody who was part of NXT was proud to be part of it, and like that we are NXT, and we're going to come into SummerSlam weekend, we're going to come into WrestleMania weekend, and we're going to steal the show, and that's what we did. And there was a real pride there from you guys all the way up through to Hunter, I think.
Yeah, it was really special. And like when they, structurally, like the writing team kind of broke into different sections even though like the writing team would like send a group down to NXT once a month when, you were canning 4 episodes of taping. Right. When NXT went live and SmackDown moved to Fridays, the writing team kind of changed. And mainly, for our listeners that don't know, like, it's very expensive, a lot of travel and a lot of different things with this show because this is a massive TV production. When Raw and SmackDown were Monday, Tuesday, that made it really easy for the writers to go from Raw to SmackDown. And then for the writers that were NXT writers to go from SmackDown to NXT. Right. Having like the schedule just kind of blew up in a way. So I was saying on the last episode, like myself and another writer, we went and we tried to get it approved where we would go from Raw or SmackDown, whichever show we were on, to NXT still and still be a part of the team. And like they would not approve it, unfortunately, which was a massive bummer. And we totally understood it. They wanted specific teams focusing on specific shows. Right. But then like I was like, whether I came back at the end of my time there for the last like 3 or 4 months. I was flying. I was going to NXT every week, kind of as they started doing these like consultant roles. And I was like the SmackDown consultant for NXT. And it was like, it made me miss it even more. And it kind of motivated me to kind of try to like, well, if this can't be like full time, like I need to find something else that like brings this joy out of me.
Right. That makes sense. It sounds similar to my story, where I was just same as you, dude. Like I grew up WWF fan living in New England, everything was WWF. We didn't even have like NWA or WCW until later when I was older, so since I was 10 years old, all I ever wanted to do was be part of the WWF, and then I signed there in 97. And I started as an extra in 91 and then signed in 97. And then Scotty 2 Hotty thing took off in 99. And then, left in 2007 as talent, came back as a coach in 2016 and was there for another, almost 6 years, I think. And it was, it was great, but I was kind of the same way, I think, where something felt off, something didn't feel right. And, maybe I keep saying like a little was on me, a little was on them, a little was a combination. A lot of it might've been midlife crisis, I don't know, but I saw guys outside of WWE kind of doing what I loved about pro wrestling. I saw Matt Cardona killing it on the independent scene with basically just using his social media as his machine, and that's what I keep telling guys when I do these seminars is you don't need a AEW or a WWE machine behind you as much as you used to have to. You see guys like Danhausen. I still haven't even seen the guy wrestle, and I just met him at WrestleCon for the first time. I have a friend of mine who's in Vegas, who's in the entertainment world, not pro wrestling, and he's sending me Danhausen videos, going, "What's the deal on this guy?" And I was literally at NXT TV when I got the first Danhausen video from my buddy in Vegas, and I think that says a lot. These people are reaching out outside of the wrestling world, using their social media, and I just saw an opportunity that I thought I could still do something, and I took a chance. I kept saying I had no solid plan B. When I left plan A, it just I had to take a chance. I had to do it, and it's been great.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like were you scared when you left? Because I was terrified for when I left.
Yeah, I mean, you're walking. And I knew like I'm walking away from a direct deposit into my bank account every Monday morning to go back to gig life. Basically, being an independent wrestler, it's gig life, and you might have 30 dates in May, but then in July you have nothing on the books yet, So it's that, and and you just, usually something pops up, but it's that stress, and it's scary. The unknown is scary, right? So
Yeah.
but I just felt like, I just can't do this anymore. Just so much had changed there, and I wasn't happy. I'd be driving to the performance center, and I just wasn't. My stomach would be in knots, and I was like, I need to change something. I've always told my kids that you have to find something that you love doing and do that for work, and that's what I had done for so many years. And I just felt like I had done everything. And as you know, like a lot of changes were happening there with NXT and the restructuring and the rebranding. And they kind of took this, they kind of took my kid that I love so much and just like sent him off to live with somebody else. And here's another kid that so it was bizarre. And it was just, a lot of new rules going on, and, they want it taught this way, and you can't do this and you can't do that. And to me, dude, like, pro wrestling is art. Like, and I'll say this in my seminars all the time, like there's no right or wrong way to do this. I might not agree with something. It might not be my thing. Getting hit with light tubes isn't my thing. Diving off 30-foot balconies isn't my thing. But if it sells tickets and you can get an audience to come watch you do that, there's obviously something to it, but it doesn't mean I have to agree with it, So, and that's what pro wrestling is to me. There's millions of different ways to do it, and it just felt like they wanted everything done the exact same way. And
yeah, it's interesting. And like, side note too, like if you are an independent wrestler or you're interested in getting into wrestling, like I can attest, like I've never taken one of Scott's seminars, but when I was starting out at NXT, I worked on some segments with Scott, and like I learned a ton. Especially like we had this sanity segment that I just was so green with, and Scott just helped get me through in such a big way. And like, if you want to learn about professional wrestling, like Scott is like such a valuable resource. So definitely, if you can take one of his seminars, please do.
Thanks, man. It's funny because before I went back as a coach, I really didn't enjoy doing the seminars. It would be all in ring, and I'm basically a backyard guy who made it. I had no real proper training, so it was very intimidating to go back as a coach. And when I used to do these seminars in ring, and then now that I've left and I'm on the other side of it, I just talk for 2 hours and I make it a conversation. And I'll say it, like, I don't even like the word seminar because I want it to be more of a conversation than a seminar. And I want everybody to chime in, and don't be afraid to cut me off and add what you think. And like, I don't want it ever to be, okay, this is how I'm going to do this A to Z, and I do the same thing everywhere I go. I'll kind of tell my story for the first 10 minutes, and then I'll go, all right, you give me a question, and I'll get the first question, and it gets the ball rolling, and then it just kind of snowballs into its own seminar. So it's never the same thing twice, hopefully. But no, I really do enjoy doing them.
Yeah.
When you were go ahead, Chris.
Oh no, please.
When you were a trainer with the WWE, did you do seminars like that, similar to what you're doing now?
No, I just worked for WWE, but a lot of the advice and the talks that I give these people that come into the seminars, the same things. Cool. That I would, and I always hit home the same points in all the seminars, but I don't want to ever say it the same way, and I don't want to ever just to be feel like it's written out, and but I do hit home the same things, characters, storylines, create moments. I think moves are just moves. Moves are fun to watch, but unless you have a connection with an audience, you have nothing. Whether it's rock, a concert, a wrestling, a comedy, whatever it is, you need that connection with the audience. And I think that's in any form of entertainment, unless you have that connection. And it took me a long time to learn that. When I was young, I was taking private gymnastics lessons to learn how to do moonsaults, off the top rope, because I thought that was going to be my ticket, which was silly because at the time you had the, all the cruiserweight thing happening at WCW, and those guys were doing stuff that, I could never do. So like, I don't know what I was thinking, but, then as time went on, and you learn, like, wow, like I have this connection that I don't even know how I created this connection, but there's something to this, and it just something you learn over time, I think. So it's hard to teach, and I'll say this in the seminars, like you know, today you guys are probably gonna look at me like I'm this crazy old man, but I'm hoping like 10 years from now, you roll driving down the road and you go, I get it now. This is what he was talking about.
Well,
you know,
that's the thing too. Like, and I brought this up on our episode we did with Jeff Jarrett, like the importance of like throwing punches.
yes,
Which is like really like, from being there at WWE, like I have seen a lot of pushes go away because a person doesn't have the right working punch.
yeah,
One thing I think like you guys at NXT were really excellent with was a lot of times NXT would sign these independent wrestlers and they would come in and they're moving fast. They're doing all these impressive moves that like, oh man, like I could never do that. Or like, it looks like a video game character, but like they don't slow down.
right.
And
right.
I guess like a question based on that, like what is the importance of slowing down?
So this is whether you go back to the 1950s and Gorgeous George, and whenever Gorgeous George was around, I don't even know if it was 40s, 50s, 30s, but I know who he is. I've never seen him wrestle, but I know who he is because he was this larger than life character, right? So he's kind of this legendary figure now in wrestling, right? Or you go to, the Hogan era, which is what I grew up on in the 80s, or in the Attitude era. It was all based around characters, and the styles have changed over time, but something that hasn't changed is the way that a crowd reacts. So if they cheer, the cheer is still exactly the same length as it was before. They're going to cheer. You have to, or they're going to boo. And that's what you're working for, is those reactions, right? So if you go boom, 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 right, and you hit, you do a bunch of things, you haven't given that guy or girl time to react to the first cool thing you did. You just stepped on your own work, so you try to explain it like that, like, whereas you have to bring it up and bring it down, and you have to almost build in those moments where they can react. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of been lost now, is people step on their own stuff. Say all the time, this is the most athletic and the most spectacular moves we've ever seen in the history of wrestling. These guys are doing crazy stuff that we didn't even know the human body could do. And when I was a kid, and watching, and so now they're doing all these spectacular things, but they're going so fast that they don't give the audience a chance to react to them. So, and that's a hard thing to teach, because silence is scary. So if you're just standing there in the ring, it's scary. So you feel like, I have to do something, and we all went through it. I can remember the old guys telling me, you got to slow down. You're going too fast. But they didn't explain what they meant, and up until, later, once I figured out what they meant, then it made sense. It's not the pace that I'm hitting the ropes at. I don't need to slow down the way I'm running into the ropes. You have to slow down the pace of the match so that you give the audience a chance to react to what you're doing. And you more than ever, you have to spoon feed your story to them. But I'll say, like, it's one obstacle that you guys have now that I didn't have before. Before in my day, you have to, back in my day, sound like the old guy. You have the fan that they're sitting there in the audience and they're drinking and they're eating their popcorn, they're talking to their friend. But now we're intentionally driving them to their phones going, hey, Lakeland, make sure you're using the hashtag NXT Lakeland tonight. So we're driving them to their phones during the show, right? So, and whether we're driving them to their phones or not, they're still on their phones. They want to take pictures, they want to post it. So while you're trying to tell your story to them, they're doing this now. So you really have to, more than ever, I think, spoon feed your story of your match to that audience, and then, that's one of those things I think they might not understand right now, but down the road they go, oh, okay, I get it. Like, just slow it down and really spoon feed it all to them. Like, otherwise it's just moves. And I'll say, like, I love to watch all these cool moves, but I also love to watch, guys falling off their skateboards on YouTube for about a minute. I turn it off, and the moves are great, but you have to have that connection. And you can go through the list of all of the top guys in the history of what we've done, right? And they weren't guys who did real impressive moves. Hogan, Austin, Rock, like Cena, like, they weren't Undertaker. Undertaker would break out the big dive at WrestleMania, but most of the time you didn't see that from him, you know.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, yeah, like I think like, you know, from what, not having seen this match before, read like Hogan, you know, Hogan has had like a 5-star match in Japan. At the time he could do it, but that's not like what, it's not necessarily like what always works. And I think too, it's like when you're watching a movie or a TV show, like, you know, if the pacing of something is like just so that you can't keep up with it, like it's one thing if something's like a 5-minute match.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do a big money main event match that's 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, like it's a lot. It's also like not good on the performer's health.
Right. And that's the big thing. That's you, and that's hard to hammer home when they're 20 years old, because they can't even think about being 40 or even being 30 at 20. You know, and that's one of the things that I fear. I see a lot of these guys doing these dives now, and they seem to be getting higher and higher off these balconies and ledges, and like, you know, you everything we do, you're already dealing in, you know, inches of, you know, being in a wheelchair or being you know, dead. You know, like, so it's once you get higher and higher, the risk gets higher and higher, and it, you know, that does scare me. And as a guy with, you know, I have 3 screws and a steel plate in my neck, I've had low back surgery, and I didn't do hardly any of that stuff. You know, I was taking, you know, pile drivers from Perry Saturn through tables way back when I first started out. You know, this is before ECW even, but and I look back on that and go, God, that was stupid to do, you know, because you're so out of control of what the result could be, you know, when you take into account like going through a table and how's the table break, and you know, and then you take, we just did that for 100 people, you know. Like,
yeah.
But at the time, I get it, you know, and this is what I'll say to these kids, and they're like, I am you guys. I was 15 years old when I started this. I was 150 pounds. I was trying to get noticed, and like, I know that's what they're trying to do now. They're trying to get noticed, and they're trying to get on the map, and they do get reactions. So that's what I call the mind. I used to say, I don't know if I say the F word on here, but I say the mind fuck, right? Because you have all these old guys telling you slow down, but then they go out there and they go fast and they do this spectacular stuff, and they're getting reactions from it. You know, so it is a bit of who's right. The crowd's giving me reactions, but the old guy's telling me to slow down and not do so much. So is the old guy just trying to hold me back because he can't do it? Like, and that's how I used to think. You know, he's just telling me that because he can't do it. And he doesn't want me to outshine it. You know, but there is some truth to it. You know.
Yeah, it's such an interesting process, because like once I've heard workers say, who are kind of like, you know, on the veteran side, like once you are able to slow down and hear it, you like a moment happens where the switch flips, and like you understand what slowing down and pacing is and what that means and what a tool it is and how it saves on your body.
Yeah, and it's you know, it's part of the art of this, you know. And I think I'm right now being out there and doing this again, I feel like I'm the best performer that I've ever been, because I'm older, I'm smarter, I know what works, I know what doesn't work. I'm not afraid to try stuff. I'll try stuff. I'm still coming up with new stuff now that I've never done before, and I go, and I'll be like, I know there's something to this, and I don't. It's kind of like, you know, and I relate it to the worm. When I first started doing the worm, it wasn't the whole production of the WORM and the who. It was, I just hit the ropes and I dropped down and I wormed across and would drop an elbow or something onto, you know, whoever I was working with. But I was getting a reaction off just doing the worm, so I knew I had something. And you know, that's why I tell you, just throw stuff against the wall. Don't be afraid to try stuff, because you never know what's going to work in this. You know, I'm pretty sure Rikishi didn't know the stink face was going to work. Rock didn't know the people's elbow was going to become what it was. The people's eyebrow was going to become what it was. The worm was going to become what it was over time. And you just throw stuff against the wall, and probably the first time you throw it against the wall isn't going to be exactly what the end result is, but you'll like I said, you'll whittle away at it, and you find another tool to put in your back pocket, and you can break out if you need it, you know.
One thing that popped in my mind as you're talking was like, actually 2 things. But first, I wasn't surprised when you left too. Just there was I don't know if you remember this, but there was a moment where it was kind of the end of, it was right before the brand extension and NXT going live, and there was a coconut loop, and I think like the lead writer made a joke. It's like I thought about I thought about putting you on it this weekend, and your eyes lit up. It's like, oh, I can go. And like I could seeing that excitement, like the outside world, and like, you know, getting back in the ring and stuff. I was like, oh man, I could see Scotty eventually like just going and doing this.
Yeah, I would have loved to have done something. You know, not on I think I've been a good nostalgia thing to throw in there once in a while, or throw me in there with Otis and do a double worm on Coconut on NXT the road shows. You know, I felt like I could have lent more, or even let me go in there, work a 5-minute match with somebody and teach them about slowing down. You know, that's something that's missing today, is just older guys too slow there. Because unless you're in there with somebody who gets it, it's hard to slow that pace down unless you have somebody telling you, okay, slow down, wait here, okay, react here, and kind of in directing you and leading you through it. You know, so I felt that could have been a more valuable role doing some of that, but I don't know, man. Like, you know, and then just finally leaving it was a lot. It was just a lot of different things. You know, it was all the cuts. It was, you know, everybody in that company was walking on eggshells. Everybody I think we've seen it from the top all the way down. You know, who's safe, who's not safe. Like nobody was safe. Nobody knew what was going on. And then it was just, I saw, you know, I'll be 49 in July this year. But I saw guys like Edge and Christian and Jericho, Matt Hardy, Jeff Hardy. Those are all guys that are right around my age out there still doing it and doing it well. And I go, man, like if I'm going to do this, I need to do it now. You know, I just felt like it was the right time. It felt like the indies were hot. You know, there was another company on the horizon for the first time in 20 years that was like a legit company and doing something. And, you know, I was watching, you know, their shows and seeing their crowd reactions was what turned me on the most about them. You know, whatever's going on in the ring, there can be changes or not change or whatever, but watching that crowd, that's what I feed off. And that's when I watch something, I can tell you something's good or bad just by watching the crowd. That's all that matters. That's the paying customer, right? So it doesn't matter if the guys are entertained or if the people in the ring are entertained. It should be like, how is that crowd reacting to what's going on? And I saw, you know, independence, AEW, I saw crowds reacting like the way that I remember, like, and even now, dude, I go to Liverpool. I've been to 2,000 people in Dublin about a month or so ago for OTT. And these crowds are like Attitude Era crowds. Like, so why aren't we seeing that on Raw? I watched the main event on Raw last night, and nothing against, everybody's working so hard, maybe too hard at times, but why are these people sitting down? And you can literally see people on their phones, you know, and like they're checking out. Like, so I don't understand if there's a lack of a connection. I don't know. I can't tell you what it is, but
yeah, I think like, you know, with that main event last night, I think everyone is connected to those guys in that ring. But I always feel that, like, and you see the ratings kind of dictate this, like 3 hours is a very long time for a wrestling show.
It's a long time for anything.
Yeah. I mean, like that's like an Avengers movie with commercials. Every week it's 52 weeks. And like, I think, you know, you're kind of dealing with something of like, you know, commerce versus art of, you know, I think if the company had their druthers, like every show would be 90 minutes. I think like part of that is I think, you know, I haven't heard the top people say that, but I have heard people who deal with the top people say that. And I think a part of that becomes like Saturday night's main event was 90 minutes, always felt like a good show, always felt like an event. That being said, like, you know, Raw is keeping the USA network afloat. Like they are always going to be a top 5 or 10 network because of Raw. I'm sure that they will be aggressive when the rights deal comes up to keep it, because essentially like they're on borrowed time without WWE. So that they want 3 hours so they can stay in the top 10, stay in the top 5 of cable networks. And they pay for such. Like this is like, I think, you know, like a, a WWE has 3 deals worth $1 billion each for a reason. And it's hard, like, and you know, as much as like it may make Raw feel longer at times, like, you know, more, and obviously there were cuts recently, but like when you have companies like USA and Fox paying this money and Peacock, it creates more jobs.
Right.
More jobs in ring for, you know, performers, more jobs behind the scenes. And, you know, it's good in that way. So it's kind of like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't element.
And I get that, you know, and I guess it's, I miss the, you know, take out the financial part of it, and it's the art of it. You know, I've learned on this run over the last 4 months or so, just how much I love the art of what we do.
Yeah.
And when it's done well, it's the best thing. It's the best thing. You know, we talk about, you know, creating moments and putting smiles on faces, and that's the art of what we do, you know. It's funny you said about the 90-minute thing, Chris, because I've been thinking about, you know, as I'm back out on the independent scene again, I'm seeing stuff I like, I don't like, the stuff I hate, and I gotta do this so differently. And I've honestly thought about running my own live events with no intention of live stream, no intention of television. It's a 90-minute show with no intermission, and you have to be there to see it. You don't know who's going to show up. And I'm thinking 5 matches, 6 matches at the most, but like you said, 90 minutes.
Yeah. And
it's all, what I would want to do is a self-contained live event show where you didn't have to be there the month before to see what happened. It's your main event angle starts in the first half of the show, and it ends in the main event. And then the next show, you could have a totally different crew there. And the same thing. And I feel like there's something to that. And there's just a lot of stuff that I see out there. Like, man, like in 2022, it feels like independent wrestling could be done better. And we're only doing some things because we've always done them this way, and it's become the norm. And, you know, a perfect example of what I'm talking about is the pre-show meet and greet. I hate the pre-show meet and greet because it kills all of this star value of whether the person is a star or not, but after sitting at a table for an hour, 2 hours, collecting money, selling pictures and their merchandise, you know, even if you have a diehard fan and they're the first one to come in, they come right to your table, they buy your merchandise, now they go to their seat, they sit there and they watch you for an hour or 2 hours, just become a little less of a star. And you're just a normal person. They see you on your phone and they see you eating or drinking, and now you're just a normal. And I think that's something that WWE teaches you is, and you know, people always make fun of, you know, you're a WWE superstar, you're not just a pro wrestler, you know, and that's for a reason, because we are just normal people, but you want to be perceived as a superstar and something special. You know, there's no other form of entertainment that I can think of. Even if it's a D-list band who had a one hit in the 80s, they don't do their meet and greet before the show. They come out on stage, look like stars, and then they may do their meet and greet after. Same thing with comedians, you know, they'll do their meet and greets after their performance. You know, when everybody looks like a star after the performance. But this, you know, in independent wrestling, it's just everybody out there selling their stuff for an hour, 2 hours, and their star value just dwindles away in that time, you know.
And also too, I think you made a really good point about, like, you know, how the internet has kind of changed it. And like you brought up, you know, Matt Cardona, like the stuff that he's been doing with like Mickey James and Chelsea Green on Twitter, like that story's been going every day. And like, that whole group, like, you know, Mickey's always been phenomenal. I'm glad she's having this great run. Chelsea, I felt, was like really underutilized. Unfortunately, just kind of how everything broke at WWE, and like, you know, I'm glad that their personalities are coming out and they're getting to like really shine in this way. And like, you know, this story, like they're just making it happen in such a great way.
Yeah, it's great. And, you know, it's all through social media. No, there isn't a machine behind them. There's no promoter behind them. We are our own promoters now. And, you know, I try to be smart with my social media and try to promote myself to look valuable and look like a star, and you know, use it to my advantage to help my worth and my value, you know, and I feel like it's worked pretty well. You know, I just had my first weekend off this past weekend since I started back this year. And that was to go to my girlfriend's brother's wedding in Washington, D.C. So I wasn't even home, and I leave this Friday for Washington State. And then the following weekend is in Northern California. But the cool thing is I'm at a point in my life where my kids are old enough, my girlfriend's busy with work and school. And so instead of me flying across the country from Orlando to Washington State, flying home and then flying back out to Northern California, 5 days later, I was like, where could I go that I've never been? So I looked at Alaska, and Alaska was like $200 round trip ticket. So I'm going to go to Alaska for 4 days and do something I've never done. So it's
Awesome.
a pretty cool place,
We talked a lot about the independent scene and the independent circuit. What are some of the matchups you're looking forward to?
Honestly, anybody that I worked with at NXT is
Okay.
super cool. It's super cool for me to be in a ring. I just did a show with Eric Young
Nice.
last weekend. I did a show with Killian Dane the night before. It was crazy. I had breakfast with Killian in the morning in Scotland, got on a plane, flew to Ireland, and saw Eric Young in Ireland. So two different members of Sanity on the same day in two different countries. Kona Reeves, dude, I'm going, how is Kona Reeves not wrestling somewhere? You have a 6 foot, what is he, 6'4", Chris? Something like that. 6'3", 6'4", Hawaiian kid who gets it. He's so good. He spent 7 years in developmental, did everything right, got his body in shape. Good looking kid, good kid.
Very punchable heel. Like he is it feels like I always thought there was a way to utilize him. And I think, at the end of the day, I and this might be messed up to say, but there is we kind of talked about this on another project, what is somebody's floor?
Right.
And whether they kind of go to a higher level, is another thing. You look at somebody like Edge and Christian, they were doing the comedy stuff for a while. If that was their floor and that's all they did, and then raise up to the Hall of Fame levels they reached, that's a very valuable thing on a 2 or 3 hour show.
Right.
I always felt Kona had this thing where you could have him come into a backstage as a pot stirrer, always can kind of, worst case scenario, he is an annoying heel that can get his comeuppance and make a mid-card babyface as you build them. He's incredibly talented. He should be on a roster.
Yeah. And another thing, I think a guy like him, he was just missing a confidence that you need.
Yeah.
And I use it with Rhea Ripley all the time. Rhea, when she came into my class, and Raquel, same thing. Those two ladies came into my class. And the one thing they got in that class was confidence. I had them in there with Ricochet and Leo Rush and Fabian Marcel. Those guys were in my class at the time. So I had those two ladies work with those guys where they could lay their stuff in, not worry about hurting them, and just listen to these guys who are phenomenal in the ring and lead them. And they got some sort of confidence that changed the both of them. They weren't the same. And it's hard to explain. Once you get that, I remember getting it when we started the Too Cool thing. I got a confidence that I never had before. And you become, it's different. It's hard to explain, right? And you'll see it happen. And I think you can go back and look at it with the greats. Rocky, when he first came in, when he became a Rock, he had a different confidence in Austin. And, you go through everybody probably and see at some point they got that confidence that they needed. So with a guy like Kona, to me, if you could have thrown him up on the road shows and thrown him in there with some good guys who could lead him and get him that confidence, it would have helped him a lot. And maybe broken him a little bit more out of his shell. But back to your question, Nick. All of my NXT people. Next weekend I'm wrestling Chris Bay
Nice.
in Washington, and then the following weekend I'm wrestling Colt Cabana in New Jersey, which is a match that I didn't know I needed to have. Until I saw it advertised, I was like, oh, that's cool. We can do some cool stuff. I don't even know what we'll do, but I know our styles are very similar and we'll be able to do make some magic together and do some different stuff,
Is that for, oops, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that for GCW, the one with Colt?
No, it's for WrestlePro in New Jersey. Yeah.
Because I saw one of those videos that it went viral. You doing the worm at I think it was Atlantic City against Joey Janela.
Yeah.
Dude, the crowd went nuts. And speaking, like you guys were talking about the connection with the audience, how did that feel? You know, going, you know, leaving WWE, now wrestling in the independent circuit, and you still get that kind of pop, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I honestly didn't know what my reaction was going to be there. That was my first match back, January 1st with Janela. And I wasn't in ring shape. I wasn't supposed to have my first match until 3 weeks later, but GCW, it went from being a surprise appearance with the lights out, lights back on, hit a bulldog, hit a worm on somebody, to, hey, we think we get more out of it advertising you for a match with Joey Janela. So I was like, all right, so I'm trusting you guys. It's your audience. You know what's best, right? But as far as being in ring shape, I was nowhere near ready. And I remember years ago, but probably 2008, right after I left WWE, I did a Ring of Honor show in LA. It was me against Larry Zbyszko with Johnny Fairplay as the referee. And they booed me out of the building, you know, because I was the WWE guy and I was the anti-Ring of Honor type of guy, you know? So I was like, I didn't think at this point that that would be the reaction with GCW, but I also didn't know. I still had that Ring of Honor thing in the back of my head. So when the music hit and I came out and they went crazy with just the reaction and the chants, I literally started to get emotional in the crowd, in the corner. You could see it, like they started some chant that I'd never heard before, like Scotty Too Hotty chant, and it's how it's been everywhere I've gone. I keep saying, like, this run is something different, like I've never experienced before. You know, I was on the independents for 9 years after I left WWE in 2007, and this time coming back, it's almost like there's this really super cool nostalgia thing happening that I didn't know was going to happen. But then when I stop and think of it, I go, okay, a kid who is 10 years old in 2000, when we danced in the Royal Rumble, is now 32 years old and has kids of his own. And I've had it happen where, you know, and they come up to me, you know, at the meet and greet, and they, you know, like, they introduce me to their kids, and or you know, a girl come up to me and say, I was a little girl, my grandmother used to take me to wrestling, and, you know, she passed away. And like, I'm like, don't even start, because I don't know if it's this old age thing or just this really cool time I'm going through in my life, or like, I'll literally start crying at times, you know, and I've done it in my seminars where I'm talking about Raquel and Rhea and seeing them, you know, come into my class, and like what I just said to you guys, where it's like I see them get the confidence. And Chris, this is cool, you'll like this, I think. The very last segment that I produced for NXT was the WrestleMania on sale show for this past WrestleMania in Dallas. You know, we would do 4 or 5 matches at the day the tickets go on sale on the field, and it's a free show. And, you know, then they'll have some SmackDown and Raw superstars there to cut promos. Undertaker's there, Steph was there, you know, and Big E was there. But then we did, you know, 5 matches. The very last match was Raquel versus Dakota. And the finish was Raquel makes her come back. Dakota rolls out of the ring like she's going to leave. She starts backpedaling up the ramp. We hit Rhea Ripley music. Boom. Rhea comes up to the ramp. Dakota turns, sees her. She starts backpedaling down the ramp. There's Raquel. Throws her back in. They go into their finish, 1, 2, 3. So after all that stuff I went through with those 2 ladies, the very last segment is the 2 of those, Raquel and Rhea, standing tall in the middle of Dallas Cowboys Stadium. You know, it wasn't empty, but it was still a WWE show in Dallas Stadium for WrestleMania. And it's just the 2 of them celebrating as we close the show. And that was my very last thing that I did. So I texted him the day I left there. I go, hey, if this is the last thing I ever do with WWE, it's a perfect ending to my time there. You know,
that's so awesome to hear. And like, you know, talking about like NXT moments, like, you know, obviously, like, we have so much, I'm having so much fun talking to you. I think Nick is too, like, not to speak for you, but like, you know, we don't want to take up too much of your time. Like, looking back at NXT, like, that could take forever. Yeah. One moment, like, you brought up Rhea. One moment that like really was like one of the cooler times of my time with the company was like when Rhea came to face Shayna that first time, and it was supposed to be a one-off, like just like a TV attraction, and then like the audience was just so hot for it, where Full Sail, like you get 250 people in there. Sometimes it sounds like 250, but this sounded like the Garden. Like it was so hot. And like I guess from your perspective, like it kind of made it where like Shayna was on this big run, and like, oh, this was the perfect way to transition to like bring Rhea in and kind of build this new star, and she became white hot. As somebody who was like so close to her, what was that experience like for you to see her kind of come, supposed to be a one-off, and then become this like white hot act?
Yeah, it was so awesome to see, and I knew, she was pretty down when she came into my class, and her confidence was down, and just to see her grow and go out there and do that. And then, so you're not talking about when she won the NXT women's.
No, so there was like a time, so the taping before that, she came in and was supposed to be a one-off, and I think the match ended in like with Shayna either getting DQ'd or by countout, which led, I think, to either, my memory is a little fuzzy on it, but either then like doing the rematch in the next one or like building to it. And then like you kind of have like you kind of have that like Lex Luger 98 moment where like the whole locker room,
everybody was in there.
Yeah.
So I went, that one I remember vividly. I went out into the arena to watch it, and I was up on the stand with the sound guys and everything, and everybody came down, they were lifting her up, and same thing. I remember like I'd like getting emotional and have a tear run down my face. I'm like, oh, I hope nobody sees me. And I look over, and there's Canyon Seaman, who hired her when she was basically a teenager, I believe, right? And he's doing the same thing, so it was like that. And that was the thing, like NXT, dude, it was so different. It was so genuine. It's genuine and as pure as the wrestling business can get, I believe, was NXT. It was still the wrestling business, but it was still this genuine and just very passionate environment. And it was a team. It was a team. We traveled on a bus together. We flew together. We stayed together. We ate together. And I tell you, like I was the main producer on those the NXT road shows for about the last year or so. It was always me and somebody else. Blue made me the main. That was my main thing, and I really enjoyed that. And I loved going out and seeing people who had never worked outside of Florida on an NXT show get out there and get in front of a real hot audience, going to Pittsburgh or Cleveland or Cincinnati, wherever it was, that they don't normally, we'd be in, Lakeland, once a month, or, Sebring once a month, or Venice once a month. So they would kind of get used to you, and you kind of lose that genuine reaction because they're seeing you so much. Whereas if you go to some of these towns that they don't ever see you, it gets even hotter, and the numbers are higher. Down in Florida, we're doing probably 300 to 500 people. You get out on the road shows, you're doing a couple thousand some nights. So it was fun to be a part of, man.
Yeah, and Rhea is such a great example of like NXT developmental. Like you can always tell, like, she has the look of a star, and like, her size, like she's this very powerful, strong woman, and like, she's different than everyone else, and like giving her an opportunity to find her voice. Like when I was like, when she was like, before that run, like I was always trying to get her to the main roster. Like one time I even pitched like trying to do a Carmella Rhea thing, and similar to Shawn and Diesel, just because it felt like, having Carmella be the mouthpiece as like Rhea learned on the road. But like, from like that was like 6 months before that run that we're talking about now. And like, she was a completely different performer in those 6 months. And like, she grew in such a main way. And that's like having those classes, being there every day, and like doing that. Like what, I guess, to people who are kind of outside of it, like what is a NXT class like exactly?
There's no real formula to it. Usually what I do is give them, it would be 2-hour class. When I first went there, it was 3 hours. I got cut back to 2 hours. I give them the first half hour or so to roll, stretch, whatever. And it would depend on the level of the class, what we worked on. And so similar to my seminars, a lot of times I will kind of plan something that I want to do, but it will take on a life of its own. And we'll go, okay, well, we're not going to do the matches we planned on doing. We're going to work on punches or kicks or heat drills or, and the biggest thing for me was to make it fun for them, to make it fun and to build a connection between me and the talent. Because some of them would come up with almost a wall up, because they've already come into this system where there's 8 different coaches or 9 coaches, and everybody's telling you different things, and no different than wrestling's ever been. Because when I went to WWF, it was producers or agents then, and everybody's telling you different things, and you're thinking, okay, who do I listen to? Whose feelings do I hurt by not doing what they told me to do? And it's all that part of that the game of what we do, the mental game. So it was building a relationship with them, and it was a big thing for me, which I didn't realize going into it would be part of my job. Getting them to trust you, and that you're in their best interest, and you're genuinely trying to help them. So it would be, we would work on whatever. Some days we would just do matches. And we'd do the match, and then sometimes I just record it on a cell phone or an iPad, and then we'd watch it back immediately and kind of critique it and get everybody else's input on it. And then maybe we'd do the same match the next day and let them implement those critiques and try to fix what we talked about. So it's never really a real formula to it. I kind of like to go in and, we would have, it's funny, they would bring in all these different professional people from the outside and telling you how you should coach and how you do this. And you should have a game plan, a written out plan for the week. And dude, you know how it is there. You get there, you don't know who's going to be there, who medically is going to be cleared, who's going to be over and talking to the acting coach, who's over talking to this other coach, who's talking to this, they have all these different things they're bringing in there. And you never know. It's hard to plan out. So most of the time it would just kind of be almost like, winging it, for lack of a better word, but just making the most out of that 2 hours and trying to make it fun for them and get the light bulb to go on and click. And, and sometimes it would just be drills like we talked about earlier, is getting them to slow down. All right, so turn it up right here and, beat them down in the corner, but then to step back and show me something personality wise. Give me something, just give me a moment there where they can react, stuff like that, and that's something I'll say in my seminars too, is like, and I always use 10-year-old little Johnny. I'll say 10-year-old little Johnny. That's who we're playing to. We're not worried about the 45-year-old guy who's writing the reports on Twitter. We're worried about 10-year-old Johnny coming to his first wrestling show ever. And he's going to see 20 to 30 wrestlers. He's going to see 2 referees, a ring announcer, a manager, all of these different personalities. How are you going to give little Johnny something to remember you by and describe you by when he goes home at the end of the show? You want to give him one thing. And that's what I'm like. Think of one thing that's going to make you different than everybody else on this show. And I can't think of that for you. You have to come up with something different that he can go, oh, that's the guy that does the worm. That's the guy that does the stink face. That's the guy that does whatever it is. Just it could be something you say, something you wear. It's probably, and I'll say, like, it's probably not going to be your name, because if you win, they'll hear your name twice. If you lose, they hear your name once on the entrance. So it's not going to be your name that they remember. Give them something else to remember you by. It could be as simple, you stop and you have a moment with a kid and you take his arm and you give him a high five, or whatever it is. It's, it sounds silly, but it's all these little things that make you different than everybody else. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of moves.
One thing I haven't really heard people talk about, but I think you have a good understanding of, better than most people, is, the pandemic, COVID. I feel that has had a massive impact on NXT, just from more so than people even realize, people have been talking about, just because from every wrestler's development, because people weren't able to actually get in the ring and work for a very long time. And I don't think people realize that.
And I guess, still not.
Yeah.
Or, in front of a live audience.
Yeah. Or in front of a live audience, or even there was a period like when heat of it where you couldn't have class.
Right.
And like, I guess just like from your perspective, what was that like to go through, and how frustrating was that for you? And like, do you think that set wrestlers back like a month or a year, or just like?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it's not. I mean, even now, like what I just said, like so much of the art of this is performing in front of a crowd. Like I think we've learned through the pandemic how important the audience is in pro wrestling when they're not there. You know, from all of the shows we were doing, from Raw, SmackDown, NXT, you're doing shows with no fans. Like you realize how important they are. So now these people are being taught from the ground up, and they're just learning in a cold warehouse, you know, in front of their peers, basically, which can be the toughest crowd, but it's also not a genuine crowd. You're not getting genuine reactions. You're getting your peers' reactions. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't know how to put a time on it, how far it set them back, but I would say, you know, at least a year, you know, just, I mean, when we were first coming out of it, I remember we finally felt like we just got back into the swing of it. And then like 3 people in my class tested positive that day. So it shut everything down in my class for whatever the time period was, 10 days, 2 weeks. You know, I think it was like 2 weeks when it first, you know, somebody's tested positive, you had to isolate for 2 weeks. So then you would almost have to reset and start back from scratch again, and just, you know, trying to make the best of it. But it's a crazy, crazy time it was.
Yeah.
And anybody who worked through that time, you know, the Drew McIntyres, those guys that were working and trying to get over on live television with no audience, those guys deserve huge amounts of credit.
It was
I don't know how I would do it, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, so much of what I do, Chris, is crowd, like playing with the audience and reactions, and like how do I do what I do without an audience, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. Like those shows were sometimes like awkward, or you tried to figure out ways to be creative to push them and use it as an advantage. But like we started doing a lot more stuff backstage. I think like one benefit of those shows is like when you're doing the double tapings, you can like tell 2 weeks of stories without having anything be blown up.
Right.
But yeah, it was rough, but it was like also like if we didn't do them, like who knows where the company is today.
Right.
So you're trying to keep the lights on. To kind of like speed through this so we don't take up too much more of your time. You're talking about Raquel, who is awesome. Obviously just getting to SmackDown. How would you book her, and what do you think her strengths are?
Man, I think she's a tough girl who's a big girl. Like, so to me, like she needs to just come in and dominate. Like we haven't really seen a woman do that, where they just come in and almost not Goldberger, but to that, you know, like build her up. It just feels like everybody's so almost 50-50 now. Like, let's see her come in and dominate for a while, because she's a big, tall girl who's great shape and very physical. So let her be that, you know, and see what happens, you know?
Yeah, I think those segments can be very entertaining. And I think like when you kind of look at like when Braun broke off from the Wyatts, and like, you know, like you're in Golden State and you have like a tag team he's going against called the Splash Brothers, or like, you know, Nia kind of like the way she kind of came in, and you have those entertaining segments. There's ways to build character and show dominance, which she already has like such a great personality too. Like,
right.
Like you don't have to worry about bringing that out. You just have to put her in a position to show it.
To do it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and you've got, you know, so many, you know, babyface girls, like they can go out there and they can do it, and they can fight from underneath, and she can, you know, you can make them at the same time. You know, just because you're not going over doesn't mean you don't get over, you know? Like,
yeah, I think a good example of that when I started at the company was like the Braun and Sammy story. Like Sammy, you know, like was always entertaining, was always and I think people like, he's such a damn good heel now. Like I kind of feel like he's the modern Roddy Piper, but like he like was such an amazing baby face, and like he really got over as much as Braun did in that story. And like obviously, you know, Mick Foley was helping with that too, but like it was such a great partnership of like you were able to build two people at once in such an amazing way.
Yeah.
And then I guess final question for you is kind of a two-parter. Do you have like a one moment from the Attitude Era that's your favorite, and one NXT moment that's your favorite?
Oh man. For me personally, that I was involved in, or
Yeah.
Attitude Era, I always have to go to the Royal Rumble, dancing Rikishi and Bryan, you know, in the middle of the Rumble. And I talk about it a lot these days, just because, you know, doing interviews and you know, even in the seminars, people ask me about my favorite moment. And it's something that when we did it, we thought it was, you know, I think we knew it was cool, but we didn't realize that 22 years later, people would still be talking about it. And, you know, I wish I remembered more about the day. I remember Pat Patterson. I remember Rikishi and I were standing in the locker room in Madison Square Garden, and we were looking at the sheet on the wall. And I remember Pat coming up to us and kind of giving us the outline of what they wanted. But other than that, I don't remember a lot about it, you know, and it's just like, it's the crazy part about that. And I didn't even realize this till recently when I started talking about it more, was Rikishi and Too Cool didn't become a thing until December of '99. You know, Brian and I had been Too Cool from like October till December. And then Rikishi came out, saved us, made a save. We did the dance. Now the Royal Rumble was only a month later, and it was red hot. Yeah. Like, dude, like, I mean, watching that now is going, how is that even my life? How is that me? Madison Square Garden, which is a hard crowd to win over in the first place. I remember being, you know, young when I first signed and going there and wrestling, you know, Aldo Montoya and, you know, Savio Vega and the Headbangers, and it just, they would boo me. I was a babyface, and it booing me out of the building, you know, and you know, yelling, "Yeah, jobber," and you know, like, so you know, when you at that point in your career, you hate going there. So to see what happened during the Too Cool run, and to feel so loved by that audience was just insane. And to think it was only a month after it all started is just crazy, you know. Yeah. And back to, you never know what's going to work, right? I remember when Michael Hayes said, "Hey, you know, Rikishi's going to come down, and you know, he's going to make the save, and then you guys do a dance, and you know, he's wearing this thong, and you go, you know, at the time." And I still sometimes go, "Was that a rib? You know, was it a rib that got over, you know, and it backfired on them?" Like, so it just seemed so crazy. And on paper, you go, "This will never work." Kind of like the Worm. I said that about the Worm. On paper, if I sat down and presented the Worm, okay, I'm going to hit this awful looking bulldog. I call it the world's worst looking bulldog, you know, and then I'm going to stand over the guy and I'm going to get this crazy look on my face. I'm going to run in place for 10 seconds. Then I'm going to hop to the other side of the ring, and the crowd's going to chant WORM as I do it. Then I'm going to do this whole breakdancing move where I worm across the ring, and then I'm going to go who, and the crowd's going to follow along, only for me to deliver a chop to the chest. After all that work, like, you couldn't present that to somebody and get a thumbs up on it. You know, if somebody had given that to me, I would go, "Don't ever do this. This sounds awful." And it was awful, you know, but that's what made it, was the buildup, all of that buildup and all of the theatrics that went behind that, and the crowd chanting WORM and the who. It made them part of the show. And it just worked at the time, you know, and so that's why I say, don't ever be afraid to try something. But as far as my favorite, so I'll say that moment for me, and then also the 10-man tag that we did on Raw with.
That was Dallas, right?
Yeah, Dallas.
That was one of the hottest crowds I ever remember.
Yeah, again, the crazy, you know, the crowd is what made that. Me, Brian, Rikishi, Rock, and Cactus, with Hunter, X-Pac, Benoit, Malenko, and Benoit, Malenko, and Perry. And then Eddie's on the outside. Steph was on the outside. Tori's on the outside. Wow. Billy and Road Dogg do a run-in at the end. But then here comes Kane returning with Paul Bearer at the end. Like, probably 20 people involved in that segment. And it was just magic. You know,
Yeah.
for some reason, it all just fell into place and was magic. But as far as NXT, man, I don't know. I probably have to say that segment, my final segment with Raquel and Rhea. But there was a lot of cool things, a lot of cool stuff we did on the road shows. You know, where I remember we were in Lowell, and we had the War Raiders on the show with, you know, Johnny Hansen is from the area. We had Dijak who's from we had Dijak. We had Ciampa, and we had Oni Lorcan. So what we did is, I think it was, I don't know, I'll just say it was Ciampa and maybe Cole in the main event. So you had all of Undisputed Era out there, and they come out and they do the damage to Ciampa after the finish, you know, and they leave him laying, and they go to leave. And as he goes up the ramp, boom, we hit Oni Lorcan's music. Oni steps through the curtain. Now here comes Oni and Danny, and then now Undisputed Era is backpedaling down the ramp. They jump over the barricade. They try to go out a side door. Boom, there's War Raiders music. They come through a side door in the arena. So they jump over the other side, other barricade on the other side of the ring. And then boom, there's Dijak's music. He comes through that. So you have all these New England guys on an NXT show. Yeah, that's the fun of being a live event producer and you know, putting that all together and making it work and creating cool moments as a producer, like is what you try to do as a wrestler, you know.
I'll tell a quick 30-second story before we go, because you reminded me of something. So that match, the 10-man in Dallas has always stuck with me in such a big way. I was primarily on SmackDown at the time, and Team Hell No had come back. And the week before, Daniel and Kane worked a match against the Usos on TV. So based on that 10-man, I pitched trying to put New Day, Kane, and Daniel together against Sanity, and I forgot who the other heels were, but. I pitched it once, and you try not to over pitch things. Like if you get like a no, like you have to be really passionate about going back to it. And when you're doing it 52 weeks a year, like you don't really you have to really love something to die on a hill for it. This wasn't that, but like we were still looking for a main event. And I was just like, man, like it really just feels like this is the match. This is a once in a lifetime thing. Kane's in the ring last week. We can protect Kane with the 4 other guys, and everyone loved it. I then got on a plane to go to NXT, and I got an email from Road Dogg. It was like, hey Chris, thank you, like that this main event's gonna be awesome. Thank you. So pumped up. I'm feeling really great. And Kane and Brian are on the poster for Extreme Rules. And of course in the match Kane gets hurt. So and then I got known for the next 2 months, as you do in wrestling, as the person that killed Kane. So but it all goes back to that match, because so just thank you for that memory. It's just such as a wrestling fan, it's one of my top 5 things ever, watching on TV.
Oh, thanks, man. It was again, putting it together. We had no idea the magic that was going to come out of that, and the longevity that it would have, and still be talking about it this many years later. So it was cool to be a part of, and the characters. I mean, God, you're talking about, Rock and Cactus and Eddie and Hunter and all these greats were in that in that one match, and it was just Kane and Paul Bearer. So it was a cool thing to be a part of.
So awesome.
Scott, thanks again for coming on and supporting such an amazing cause. I say it time in and time out. It's really cool to meet you. It's really cool to meet guys and talk to about wrestling. It's something we all love, but it's important for you to come on so we can make awareness for such an amazing cause. So I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Chris. Man.
Thank you, guys.